that everything is correct. So please let me know if you can hear my audio. You should be able to hear my audio. I've just adjusted everything within my computer, and the little green light has been flashing at the bottom, just for you guys so you know when you're running a Google Hangouts on air. There's a little, when you're running them, there's a broadcast button that'll appear at the bottom, and then next to it is 5 little dots that show your microphone volume, and they light up green. Probably what you would expect for a microphone volume. Anyway, it's been showing green for the last couple of minutes, so I'm hoping that that means you can hear me. Okay, so it's 7:15 Pacific time, and I do want to address a couple of final wrap-up issues. And in fact, I'm going to make a note of this time so that I can tell people when they review this video that they can skip to 7:15. Ah, you can hear me. Thank you, Lori. Yay! Okay. So it's an intimate group this morning since we had a little URL snafu. Not sure why that event disappeared. We'll definitely be doing this again tomorrow evening, and I double checked when I had this problem. I went to see if I needed to update tomorrow evening's URL, and it's working just fine. So it's very weird that this event disappeared. I have no idea. I did everything the same as all the other events. Anyway, so I wanted to start with some wrap up from the discussions that you all have been having. I've really appreciated that, and just give a little bit of final course reflection if possible. And that'll take about 10 minutes. And then meanwhile, I'll keep an eye on the question and answer box so that if you have any questions, I'm answering those as well as we go. So your discussions have been fabulous this term. I've really enjoyed the exchange of resources. And so one of the things that I'm planning to do with all of the resources that you've shared is I've had somebody, actually, I'm going to get somebody to help me go through those discussions and create a separate document that just lists links to all of the resources that you have shared. So you have a one-page document that incorporates all of the resources that have been discussed in the forums. So not just my resource sheets that you can download, but a separate one. Now it is going to take me about a week to do that with my help. So just check back. I'll send an email out to everybody in the course saying that resource sheet is ready for you, so you can go grab it out of the course. Now, since this is our last week, and I did mention this in one of our last week videos, you will continue to have access to this course until August. The rule for this program is we leave the course open for anybody that had enrolled and participated in it until the next iteration of this course goes live. So the next iteration's in August, so feel free to do whatever you need to do with the course between now and then. Now, in addition to those resources that I'm going to share, I do want to reflect on a couple of questions that have come up and have inspired some really good debates. One of them was around how to do peer review, but I don't really want to reflect on it from a tactical or a technical perspective, but I want to talk about it a little bit from using it in your own classroom's perspective. So peer review is something we didn't talk about in this class. I believe in the next class in this series, they'll get into a little bit of peer review as part of the assessment conversation, but peer review is becoming more and more important. We tend to do a lot of it as teachers, but it's usually a very informal. So we'll do things like read-arounds, have other students read essays and provide feedback. We'll do things like students presenting their solutions or their projects in class, and then other students asking questions or giving feedback, right? So we do these, we build these in usually to projects, either individual projects or group projects, and we build it into work that students creating aligned with assignments quite often. But it gets challenging when you do it in a virtual setting and you do it in a very formal way. And the reason that's challenging is because no matter how great your rubric is, there's always this room for ambiguity on how to evaluate one paper versus another, or one project versus another. So you can't possibly take the subjective out of a rubric. You just can't. Or out of subjectivity out of the review of the assignment, even with a really great rubric. So because of that, what becomes really important, and we didn't necessarily do it in here, and I'm thinking I'm going to introduce it in the next course, is helping everybody understand how to manage that ambiguity and knowing what kind of ambiguity may occur. So in this class, for example, this is a very diverse population, and we have a lot of non-native English speakers. So the kind of ambiguity that's not covered by the rubric in the peer review focuses around language and presentation of ideas and how that's written. And so first of all, I'm glad it looks like most people submitted their peer assignment in English, for example. I tried to be very clear about that. But the ability to write in English is so varying across the submissions that you start to be challenged by how can you pull out the ideas and evaluate the ideas, because they may not be as communicated effectively just because we have a lot of non-native English speakers. So really being clear up front about how to address that would be important. So for example, in your virtual classes, if you have students that, let's say you have students where you also have the non-native English challenge. There's a lot of ELL learners, for example, at least in the United States, we have a lot of non-native speakers that are more familiar with English, obviously, because they've worked through the system, but still aren't as skilled as other students. So helping them understand when they're reviewing each other, whether or not how things are written is important. And then how to get at the main ideas that you want evaluated is also important. Another example, if you're going to do formal peer assessment in a virtual setting in a science class, and you want to have students work through a problem, and you want the other students to evaluate the process that they worked through that problem, right? It's not only the answer, but it's how they got there. That can be really hard to detail on a rubric. So being very clear about, you need to review the process, and here are the stages that I'd like to see you review and to make sure that the person that submitted the assignment covered. So just being very clear about that ambiguity becomes important. Also helping students understand that comments become really valuable and how to comment. So even giving them an example, perhaps you have a project with peer review feedback on it that you could then distribute as an example to your students so they can see not only the project and how it might be evaluated numerically, but also the kinds of comments that are valuable comments. Then also giving them examples of what comments are not valuable can be important as well. So how does somebody, that way they can model good behavior, but also be able to check against what might not be as effective behavior when they're giving feedback. So two things I'm thinking, because the discussion happens every time I teach this class about peer review. And so I'm thinking of introducing a module on peer review specifically, and then giving some more examples for people to use and reflect on, so that we can use this class as not only an opportunity to have a peer review assignment that's focused on the main content of the course, but then also use this class as an opportunity to reflect on peer review and peer assignments in general. So that's my one area that I wanted to address. The second area that it's been really interesting that's come up in the discussions is around resourcing and how to balance hectic time, and I know I even posted a question regarding this, but how to balance the hectic time that you all have in trying to accomplish what you're doing in your virtual classes with learning technologies, and how do you stay current with everything, and how do you make sure that you're being innovative while still driving towards either the standards that you need to achieve in your classes or the goals or outcomes that are designed specifically for your students. So some advice on that. Whereas this class is a big collection of lots of ideas, I encourage you to stay focused on the areas that you're particularly interested in. And you can do that in two ways. One, you can stay focused on the kinds of technologies that help you do something you already do well better, something you love to do. So perhaps you love having students collaborate with one another, and you facilitate that really well. You like doing that. It's a key positive strength in your courses. Well, if you do that, continuing to look at technologies, the communication and collaborative technologies, perhaps even the social technologies are important. You don't have to worry about keeping up with gaming or assessment or other things. Stay in your domain of what you're interested in, and then that'll help you narrow down the kinds of technologies that you're regularly following and tracking down ideas around. Another strategy could be pick the area where you feel like your courses, particularly your virtual courses, need the most improvement. So in that case, you would go after, let's say, assessments. I've shared in my videos, I'm not great at designing assessments. They've always been challenging for me. It's just not in my DNA. And so I am always looking at new assessment technologies and how people apply those technologies so that I can figure out better and better ways to assess students. That's probably part of the reason why I'm so interested in improving the peer assessment piece of this. The third way you can do this is pick a topic area where maybe you're not implementing it yourself, but your school, your district, or even uh, your particular student body is driving to. So this is where gamification might be really interesting. There are some schools and districts in the US and around the world that are really, really interested in how can we apply games or simulations, serious games, case studies, things in that genre. How can we apply that to our students? Because it's so prominent and so popular in education, particularly within your student demographic, that it could be a really great learning opportunity for students, a way for them to learn more, get more in depth with the topics, get more breadth perhaps with the exposure of that subject area, and be more engaged. So then maybe gamification and games is something that you want to continue to monitor and track down. So I encourage you to pick a genre. That'll help you manage your time. I encourage you then also to identify resources that you subscribe to. So what are the ones, I tried to give you a variety of different sites that regularly talk about educational technologies for virtual classrooms. Which one of those did you find most informative and which ones didn't you? And start to follow those pages or go regularly check back on those pages. Also, you'll see in Twitter, you can really pick some educational leaders. A lot of the resources that I shared with you are aligned to bloggers that also frequently tweet. So perhaps you want to follow those folks and just keep track of what they're talking about or the articles that they're sharing or posting. You might also want to follow folks on LinkedIn. Now, I didn't use LinkedIn much here, but there are some great educational communities in LinkedIn focused on K-12 virtual teaching that you can subscribe to. So in fact, I'll also make that as a takeaway. I'll post in the discussions some good LinkedIn groups that you might want to join in order to monitor just articles and resources that people are sharing on a regular basis. So that was another one that came up. I know we don't have any questions, but we've got 6 viewers, which is great. I'm going to just take about 15 more minutes and share some of the other questions that have come up in our discussions and reflect on some of those. We had a really good debate going around gamification. I was just talking about that from a tracking trends perspective. I really liked the discussion that we got around or that emerged around gamification, and really how do you not only balance time in designing good games, but more importantly, how do you get students to focus on the learning and not the game itself? And how do you help then also persuade your schools, your parents, your districts, your communities that the kind of gaming that you're incorporating is really a positive learning experience? I think of Minecraft as a great example in that. Minecraft can be challenging because it really is a game and it's a lot of building, right? It's like, I think of it, I sort of equate it to Legos and some of the Lego Storm activities that folks can do in physical classrooms, right? It feels like a game and it feels like building something. So how do you make sure that the application is very evident of the learning? So I have a couple of strategies around that, particularly associated with gaming, as I've mentioned, that I'd like to share that teachers have shared with me. So in the first part of the challenge, it's just how do you make sure that the learning is on the forefront and it's not so much about the game? Well, the learning, great ways to do that are to build in reflection for students or peer review. So if you're having students recreate worlds, particularly aligned to historical experiences, or you're having them do it from a scientific perspective, having students regularly step back and evaluate their own work and reflect on what they've developed compared to what the assignment asked them to becomes really important. So this is great for Minecraft. This is great really for any game that you have students participate in. So that's step one, having students reflect. I think step two is having them review other students' work or participate in other students' worlds or play the game with other students, not just independently in a solo experience or a solo activity. So those, and then giving students the right questions to be reviewing against and asking one another as they're working through the game will be really important. Now, the third thing I recommend doing is lots of games have leaderboards associated with them. The challenge is if you're using the web-based games that aren't designed explicitly for learning experiences, but can be adapted really nicely for learning, I encourage you to create then your own leaderboard. So not just use the leaderboard within the game, which is focused on the game, but create your own leaderboard. So so you map those activities that you're having students do in the game against what the learning outcomes are. So rather than you made it to level 2, great, you get a badge, you can have you learned how to do X, Y, and Z chemical experiment. Great. And then that's associated indirectly with level 2. And then in your classroom, your virtual classroom, or if some of you are in a physical classroom and you're adapting the ideas in this course to your physical classroom, have leaderboards that explicitly map to those learning outcomes as opposed to the levels. And winning is equal to learning a collection of things and not just winning the game. So the nice thing about those leaderboards is the more you make those very evident, the more teachers and school districts and communities and anybody that might be challenged by the fact that you're having students play games can see them. So if you're in your virtual classroom and you're using a learning management system environment, having a table that you've built in on a page that shows the levels and what they equate to in the learning, and then shows in the game, and then shows how students are accomplishing those. We have 10 students that have learned how to do that chemical experiment, or we have 15 students that now have a full understanding of the impact of World War II. Whatever it might be would be great and very visual if you show, once again, those levels according to learning experiences, because that can help show directly how the game relates to the learning activities. You can even go so far as mapping those levels or those experiences or those parts of the game to particular standards if you're implementing in the US Common Core, if you're implementing in other countries very state-specific learning standards. And now the final debate that came up quite a bit in the discussions, which I really appreciate, often revolves around facilitation. And how do you ensure that students have all of the right instruction and right knowledge to be able to use the technologies that you're using so that you're facilitating the learning experience and not the technology use? And this actually comes up in questions not only around specific tools that you suggest for one another in those discussions, but this also comes up around this class, right? So there's been feedback at times about, hey, I need some more instruction. You're assuming I know too much. Can you give me more instruction? So here's a couple of things that I've learned from working with teachers through this course and through some other experiences that help manage the technology training of your students versus the facilitation of that experience in that technology. So first, I suggest experimenting a little bit with what I do regularly in this course. It may not be fun for the students, but it's helpful for you. And the experiment I suggest you do is Give students as minimal instruction as possible and see how they do on low bandwidth activities. So I'll give you an example. In this class, I didn't give you a whole lot of instruction around how to use Google Hangouts on Air. And it was deliberate, I'll be honest, it was deliberate, because I want you, first of all, to experience what that feels like so you can figure out how you would do that in your class. Would you give more instruction? What kinds of instructions would you give? What did you have trouble with? So that's first important. But then second, it also helps me understand where are the challenges in using it with this particular collection of students. So every time I teach this class, I have a different demographic. Students come with different experiences. So it's important to understand in a low bandwidth setting, these are optional, what is the knowledge around that technology so that as we continue to use the technologies, we are able to evaluate those technologies in an appropriate way. We can utilize them. We can give more instruction as we use those technologies directly based on how that particular demographic of students does. So I'll give you an example for your virtual classes. Let's say you want to use Twitter. I would encourage doing a very low bandwidth, okay, in the next hour, we're all going to get together in Twitter and have a live Twitter chat, and we're just going to talk about what we did over summer. Perhaps if you work in schools that have summer vacations, or what you did over your last break. So for those of you that do year-round schools, whatever the last break was, let's talk about what you did over your last break. That's a low band, and don't grade it. That's a low bandwidth experience. Students get a checkbox for coming and participating, and they get credit for that. But there's an official grade on the quality of their participation. It's just they've participated. And it's a way for then you to see where are the problems in using Twitter? Where are they really good at using Twitter? That way, when it comes time for that high stakes experience, you want students to brainstorm a particular topic in preparation for a project that the whole class is going to do virtually. Well, then they've had practice, and then you've had time to create instructions and directions specific to your particular cohort of students so that they have the skills that they need to be successful using that. That way, when you get into that Twitter experience, you actually can facilitate the learning and you don't have to facilitate the technology. So that's how I suggest handling that challenge. So in this class, like I said, some folks had some troubles around the peer assessment, although we tried to front load those from previous experiences, and we've had a lot less challenges around the peer assessment this time than in past iterations. There are still some challenges around signature track and figuring out how the verification process works. So that's a place where I could then come in with more instruction or more resources for people to understand that. And then also, like I said, in the Google Hangouts on Air, I actually went back in and added some instruction to the synchronous page, both for Hangouts on Air and for Twitter, so that the subsequent versions of these classes and experiences, people could have some more instruction based on the kinds of challenges we had the first couple times around. So that's some other advice that I would give. And then in the last couple minutes here, since we don't have any questions, I do want to just give everybody some suggestions for keeping in contact with one another and keeping in contact with me if you wish. So as I mentioned earlier in the session, I know a few of you have joined late. And for those of you that have joined late, if you're going to go in and watch this recording, skip back to skip back to 17 minutes into the recording, because it was about 17 minutes in where I actually started talking with everybody. Up until then, we were collecting people and fixing audio issues and doing some other things. So anyway, I had mentioned early on in this recording that the class will stay open until August. And so I encourage you to be active until August and make sure that you are regularly checking your Facebook pages and the Twitter chats. I know I've been quiet during the class. I do that deliberately in those channels so that you all can get to know each other and share ideas with each other. But now, between now and August, since the course is wrapping up this week, I will start posting more and tagging more in those areas if you're curious about some of the resources that I may share. I encourage you all to continue to share with one another. If you're in the entire program, so you're taking all 4 classes that UCI offers in Virtual Teacher, and you might even want to do the capstone, then I encourage you to keep in touch with the Google Plus communities. As you know, we have a Google Plus community for the whole program, and then we have individual spots in that community or pages for each of the courses. And those will continue to go. I had a previous Google Plus community, and I've invited everybody in that previous community to join this main group community that's aligned to all the courses. Great way to get exposed to topics in the other courses, even if you don't want to take those courses. So I encourage you to continue to be active. Go grab resources that you want. I will continue to post up some resources and send emails as I add those, so you'll still get those. So check back and grab some resources as you want out of the course. You'll also have time until the end of the course to take your quizzes. The deadline is posted in the course. It's late Sunday evening or Monday, depending on what time zone you're in. After that, you can continue to take the quizzes in the final exam. However, your grades won't count. So make sure you pay very close attention to these final deadlines. Go back into the syllabus page and look at those deadlines so that you don't miss the submission of any of the quizzes or the final exam. Those are hard deadlines. We can't change those because we then close the course officially, although it'll stay open for you to get resources so that we can do the grading and issue certificates. Those will happen after the grading's completed for those students that are on signature track. So make sure that you're just paying close attention to those deadlines. But you're welcome to keep experimenting with the quizzes in the final after that if you wish. And then my last request is, in this week's discussions, I have asked everybody to post feedback on how we can improve the course. The feedback and the improvements I'm going to make, just because I like to be very upfront with that, and it helps you perhaps reflect on how the course was taught, and it's not just the content in the course, and where that course will iterate to. So I am going to provide a little more examples, a few more examples, I should say, with the peer review and the peer assignment, especially on how to review them. And I'm going to add a module on peer review in this course. I'm going to make sure that we do more Google Hangouts on air and more live Twitter chats, because it looks like everybody liked the opportunity to come in and join and try this out. I see that someone in the classes use like WebEx, AccuStudio, there's other ones out there, GoToMeeting, that you could use for this. So it's nice to see that people are utilizing this in this way. So I will give you more exposure to those tools. And then I think the final piece of feedback that I've gotten from folks are to collect resources in a more effective way. So I'm going to figure out a way, rather than just having everybody post to discussions, to create a wiki. I think I can do that in Coursera, so that we can have one page where everybody's just adding links and annotating those links, and then it's collecting and building as we go. So I'm determined to find a way to do that in the next iteration of this course. But in the meantime, like I said, I am getting some help to go through the discussions and create a single resource page in the next week or so for you that links everything that everybody has shared. So you have one downloadable page that you can use to track all of the great resources that you have shared with one another. So thanks so much for all of your feedback. I don't think there are any other questions. I really appreciate your feedback, Lori. Thank you. And I will wrap this up. Thank you all so much for participating in the course. This has been such a treat. Every time I teach this course, it's just a great experience for me, because I love watching you all come together and help each other and brainstorm on ideas for how you can improve or further engage your students in your teaching. There's another session tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific time if you want to join us then as well in the Hangouts. I'll do similar reflections and answer questions as usual. And then I will probably also host a live Twitter next week. Even though class is over, I'm still going to host a live Twitter session, and I'll be posting those in just a few minutes so that folks can join and talk about reflections in Twitter as well if they want to do that. Otherwise, have a great day or evening or wherever you are in your time zones. Thank you again for participating, and please post any other feedback you have in our discussions, and enjoy the rest of the course. We're in the home stretch. Thanks.